Hello and welcome to Huddersfield Town's latest preview show ahead of today's game against Watford. There's loads to talk about, and to help us go through that is Opta, an analysis specialist and a Watford fan, Mike Parkin, and Stephen Chicken from the Huddersfield Examiner. How are you both? You okay?
Really good, thank you, mate. Really good.
Yeah, good, thank you.
Fantastic. We're all sporting our Christmas jumpers as well, which gives it an extra little feel as we come a little bit closer to Christmas. Mike, it must have felt for you like Christmas came early recently, having fans back at Vicarage Road.
Yeah, I mean, I've been at the games while lockdown has been in effect, and you very quickly get used to having no crowd there. So when the fans did come back, it was quite a joyous experience. I actually found it quite emotional hearing and it's not necessarily the goal cheering, because Watford haven't scored many goals to cheer with, fans have been back, but it's the little peripheral sounds, like a centre back going in for a crunching tackle, or the shout of man on, stuff like that. You really don't realise how much you miss it until the supporters are back. And I think it does make a massive difference to the match day experience, and I know the players appreciate it too. So sadly, Hertfordshire and Watford back into Tier 3, so no more supporters for the foreseeable, unfortunately. But it makes a huge difference, and a little tantalising glimpse into the future that hopefully we can get back to normal ASAP. But yeah, great to have fans back.
Yeah, we've all missed it at Huddersfield Town. Obviously, Steve, we were at the Bournemouth game, and there were supporters in there. And we're talking before, obviously, we came live on this. It felt strange, didn't it, to hear those crowd noises, like Mike said, because you kind of get used to, when you go into the games, not having anyone there and being able to hear everything that the players and the coaching staff are saying on the pitch.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this in last week's preview show, but I mean, almost preempted the Bournemouth game in saying that I think the players, just like us, will have got used to playing in empty stadiums, and I think playing in front of crowds is just a different thing. And as I say, it's just unfortunate that Town, over the Christmas period, where they've got 4 of the next 5 games are at home, and we're not going to be able to have fans in attendance off the back of the latest government announcement. So yeah, hopefully they'll be back in the new year at some point. But yeah, they'll have to continue as they are over this festive period.
It is a real shame, isn't it? Because the way and some of the football that Carlos Corberan's side's been playing this year, the fans would have absolutely revelled in it, especially with us at the minute as well. Obviously, 3 wins on the bounce at home. Yeah,
I mean, you look at, you just think about the fact that they've never seen Carlos Corberan's side play. They've never seen Pippa play. They've never seen Karolaitin play. All the players that they signed in the summer, and they've not had a chance to see them with their own 2 eyes, which is a bit of a pity. To be honest, I do understand though why there is so much caution around it. I think the clamour to get fans back into the ground started very early. Probably, and I think the second spike has shown sort of the wisdom in holding back on that and being quite careful with it. And I think it's right to be cautious, because we are still in the middle of that second spike. But at the same time, I do understand that fans are itching to get back, and they want to see their team play.
It'll be a bit strange for Watford, won't it, Mike? Obviously, going from having a crowd there and then not having a crowd, and for the fans as well, I can imagine they'll have been over the moon to have been at a game, but then incredibly disappointed when obviously Hertfordshire goes back into Tier 3.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how the players react. I mean, Watford's form hasn't been great. They haven't been scoring lots of goals. So having said all that, there was a few little murmurs of discontent against Brentford and at home to Cardiff, the 2 games that have had supporters. Quickly, how quickly fans revert to type when they get back into the ground. We do love a grumble, don't we? But it does make the whole event, the whole experience, much more, as we know, and players do run on adrenaline. And players are performers; they're entertainers, aren't they? And they love the they love the crowd there, and it will be difficult. But the people, as Stephen was saying there, the people I feel most for is the supporters, both of Huddersfield, although they might be thankful they're missing out on watching a slightly an unentertaining Watford at the moment, shall we say. They might be grateful for missing out on that one. But for so many of us, it's such an important part of our lives, especially over the Christmas period, isn't it? Getting together with friends and relatives and making that pilgrimage to either Huddersfield or Watford to see a team in action. So it's for our fellow fans I feel most sorry for, because it's such a huge part of that daily life, and to have it snatched away again is pretty tough. But yeah, it'll be. It's just weird. It's another. This season has been played out against a very strange backdrop, isn't it? And it's something else for the Watford players to contend with, going from 2,000 noisy fans on Tuesday to no one on Saturday, and they do have to adapt to that. It's another thing they've got to deal with, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm sure I can speak on behalf of all of us that we feel incredibly fortunate to be able to go to games over the last 6 months while fans haven't been there. Mike, obviously Huddersfield Town fans then won't have seen too much of Watford, especially since Vladimir Ivic was appointed. Talk to us about him, what he's brought to the club, the style of play.
Well, I have to say, a little bit envious of hearing Stephen there talking about how the free-flowing football that Huddersfield are serving up, because we haven't quite had that at Watford so far this season. I mean, we're obviously third in the table, and that's important. The focus of this season is to get promoted, or to at least have a really good go at getting back into the Premier League at the first time of asking. So on the face of it, things not going too badly at all. But I think, so credit to Vladimir Ivic. Again, I mentioned this against a difficult backdrop. Watford have had issues with COVID. There's a couple of at least two players out at the moment who are having to isolate because of that. Obviously, there was intense transfer speculation over a lot of Watford's players following their relegation from the Premier League. So it's been a very, very difficult job for Vladimir Ivic, and he hasn't really at any stage had a full squad to choose from. Now, I know that probably applies for most clubs at this stage of the season. It's always a struggle, but he really has found it difficult to know who he's got to choose from at any given moment. So I have a great deal of sympathy for him on that level, but performing well in terms of results. I think where Watford are struggling is really to find that identity. He has mixed around the formation a little bit. He's played 4-3-3. He started with one up top with Troy Deeney on Tuesday against Brentford, and he's gone for the old school 4-4-2 on a number of occasions too. And none of them have felt like they've quite worked. It doesn't really feel like Watford have clicked into gear yet, it has been quite frustrating to watch at times. But on the other hand, it's quite positive, because to be third in the division, well in touch at the top of the table, still not having clicked, you can only take that as a positive, can't you? So he's found it difficult, but there are a lot of mitigating circumstances, and I think the majority of Watford fans are still very much behind him. I think it's a real key run of games now over Christmas, as it is for so many other clubs. But a difficult start, but we're sort of grounding it out. We're grinding it out. We're still in touch. So hard not to be anything other than positive, really.
It's interesting what you said there, Steve, isn't it? About changing formations, not really settling down into one style. I suppose for a large majority of clubs over this period, with games coming thick and fast, changing against teams that are different styles, you're always going to have to change. Like Huddersfield Town recently, obviously we were playing a 4-3-3, but we've played a 5-3-2, and even in the week we played, what was it, a 4-3-1-2. So the formations are changing all the time.
Yeah, I think that when you've got injuries and you've got rotation to take into account, that just goes on top of trying to adapt to the opposition. And I think there's been numerous games, and Mike, you can confirm this when you're the Opta analyst before the game, as David Hartrick is at all the Town home games. You're trying to get both teams down as quickly as you can so you can phone it into the office. And I know that there's been probably more games than not this season where the Opta analyst has been scurrying around going, what is this formation today? I can't work out what it is for both teams. So I think Town generally have had that consistency of personnel, but as you say, I think the game on Wednesday against Coventry was the first time we've seen that diamond formation. It was really with the split centre forwards and Bakuna going up the middle, and I think that is, we know that Carlos will make tweaks to the system to counteract opposition. He won't make wholesale changes to the side, as we saw last season, to counter specific opponents, but there will be sort of tweaks. And I think that it's almost a game of cat and mouse when you've got teams that are changing the formations a lot. I mean, we talked to Carlos after the game on Wednesday and said, well, why did Bakker play in that new role? And he said, well, we didn't quite know which shape Coventry were going to be, and we thought that having Bakker in the side meant that if they had a 3-4-1, 3-4-2-1, that we could have Bakker on the wing, and if they had 5 in the middle, then we could play him in the middle, and they had the 5, so they matched up. So there's a bit of, I think, having players who are versatile and who are able to adapt on the fly to those changes is going to be really important for teams, particularly over the sort of the Christmas period, which is sort of that last run of really, really busy games. We've obviously got a week after this game, but then you've got the midweek game between Christmas, Boxing Day and New Year. And then that's sort of the last of that 3-game week. It slows down a little bit, thankfully, after the turn of the new year. So I think for a lot of teams, it's a case of gritting your teeth and pushing through this month.
It's about having that adaptability as well, Steve. Like you mentioned, obviously, Bakuno had the option to play out wide or in the 10 for us in the week. We've seen in games where we've transitioned into a 5 at the back and Hoggy's moved out of that central defensive midfield role into a back 3, for example. It gives teams loads of options then, doesn't it? And ultimately, to be able to play in Carlos's system, you need to have that adaptability about you to play in those different roles.
Yeah, we've seen Pippa come on, play on the left wing against Millwall and score a goal. So, that's completely one corner of the pitch to the other. So, yeah, I mean, it's something that Carlos has talked about and something that he prizes really highly. The fact that Harry Toffolo has been training at centre-half throughout the season. And I don't think we've really had to use him there. I think maybe he got 15 minutes there as in a 3 at the back one week. But thankfully, we've been able to get through games without having to move him away from left back where he's been so effective. Bakker has played numerous different roles throughout the season as he did last year. Fraser Campbell was almost playing as a left winger against Coventry, and Isaac Mbenza was playing through the middle, which he's done before a few times this season as well. I think Swansea and Brentford he did it perhaps.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's you need your players to be adaptable. Obviously, in an ideal world, you want every player in their favoured position, but with the fixture pile-up and the injury pile-up, we're not in an ideal world.
Absolutely. And there's a bit of an injury pile-up as well at Watford, isn't there, Mike?
Yeah, we're missing, like I mentioned, we're missing a few players. One player that could be key coming back has been our left back, Adam Messina. He's been missing for the entirety of the season so far, and that's forced Watford to be adaptable, really. It really has been the watchword. So, key that we've been discussing it. So him coming back might give Watford that little bit more balance and a bit more of a platform to attack, because defensively Watford have been incredibly strong. They don't concede many, famous last words, cue Huddersfield 5-0 or something like that now. I'll take the blame straight away. So him coming back might be beneficial to Watford if he makes it. João Pedro is 50-50. Etienne Capoue unsure as well. So yeah, I'm not going to make too big a deal out of it, because at this stage of the season you will find every club, every supporter, every manager complaining about not having access to their full squad. So it is an issue, but you've got to get on with it. I mean, just the sheer amount of games coming down from the Premier League. Unfortunately, you guys had to deal with it last year. I'm finding myself at Vicarage Road again. I'm like, I can't, might as well stay here. It just seems so, the turnover is so intense. And so for the players to recover and be ready for the next game is a huge ask. So I think we would see changes in the squad and formation as you discussed anyway. So I don't think it's massively a massive issue. It is down to the head coach and the players to adapt and get on with it. But I, for one, am excited to see Messina back at left back. Whether he makes it for this afternoon's game, I'm not sure. But I think he will give us a real stability and help set that sort of base for getting forward a little bit more, because Watford have struggled a little bit with the transition from defence through midfield to attack. It's all been a little bit laboured, and I think it's right that they focus on defence, not shipping goals. If you don't concede, you're going to find it very, very difficult to lose the game. So if they keep that up, they won't go far wrong. But they do need to fine tune certainly the final third of the game, and I think with having a natural left-sided defender coming back in, because we're absolutely crying out for left footers. We've got Ken Semmer, we've got Kiko Firmino, who's been playing at left back, which is out of position. So for a natural left footer to come back, that could be huge for Watford and could give them a little bit more balance and hopefully kickstart them as an attacking threat.
It's especially away from home, isn't it? They're both sort of solid and stolid by the looks of things. It's the 4 goals scored, 4 goals conceded in 9 away trips.
Yeah, absolutely. It hasn't been the most exciting watching, as I alluded to there. But yeah, I think, and with Huddersfield in such great form at home, I would be surprised if Vladimir Ivic all of a sudden flipped his sort of philosophy on the head and went a little bit more gung-ho. Huddersfield obviously in fine form there. So Watford will not want to give up any more ground on the leaders. So I think keeping it solid at the back will be the main aim. So
I think that's probably the right approach as well, because we've seen that Huddersfield are quite good at playing against teams that sort of keep a high line and come at them, and they've not been quite so effective playing against teams that have sat back and kept things tight at the back. And you think about the games against Rotherham, where they got a sort of a 95th minute off a deflection, an own goal, and the Wickham game, the Coventry game, the Birmingham game. That has been a bit of an issue, and going back into last season as well, really as well. But there have been other games where they've been able to break that down. So they need to find the solution. They need to find that bit of creativity from somewhere, I think. Otherwise, I think we're looking at another 0-0. But yeah, I mean, Town haven't really done 1-0s this season, is the thing. One way or the other. They've only had, I think they've won 2 1-0 and lost 1 1-0. The rest of the games, they've been sort of 2-0s or 3-2s or 4-3s. So
I think if 2 teams do go at Watford, it does benefit the match as a spectacle. Brentford, obviously an exceptional footballing side, played really well at Vicarage Road on Tuesday night and almost forced Watford to come out of their shape a little bit. And Watford, as a result, looked more fluid as a direct result of having to deal with Brentford. Brentford asked the questions and Watford were ultimately able to answer them. They were under the cosh for large parts of the first half and probably lucky to go in at half-time level. But they actually looked a little bit more threatening in some ways, just having to react to how Brentford played. So it'd be interesting to see if Huddersfield sort of decide to get out onto the front foot, try and really take the game to Watford, and as such, Watford have to react, because Watford do have a lot of talent in their side. I mentioned going forward has been a problem for us, but you look on the right hand side, we've got Ismail Assar, obviously. Huge speculation following him over the summer transfer window. That will probably fire up again in January. He's going to be some player, incredibly quick. The eyes of the world obviously really focus on him in that incredible game. Watford beat Liverpool 3-0. Those are the days of the Premier League. But he really announced his arrival there, and Watford have struggled to get him into games this season. He's got incredible pace. He's skillful. His delivery is great, but Watford haven't quite worked out how to get him into matches and how to utilise him to his maximum potential. And I think that's largely down to other clubs being wary of him. He's often double marked and he gets a lot of attention, but that should free up, some of the other creative players. On the other side, Ken Semmer, one of the few left-footed players at the club, Swedish international. He doesn't necessarily look like a flying winger, but he looks to be receiving when it comes to King Ken. He really is pretty tricky, and another one who can get to the byline, real bit of old school sort of winger about him, get to the byline, get the ball in, and hopefully you've got someone like Troy Deeney attacking it. But we just haven't managed to get them going down the flanks at all yet. And I think as Watford supporters, we're just desperate for that to happen. And perhaps if Huddersfield come at Watford a little bit, it can open up some space and we might be able to get them into the game. Time will tell.
I think the flanks have been a real sort of a key area for Town and a key strength for Town when you think about Toffolo and Pippa coming from fullback, and we have had Josh Koroma and Isaac Mbenza on the wings, but obviously Josh Koroma's out injured, and I think that the challenge now really is that when Town have been able to play Isaac Mbenza, Fraser Campbell, and Josh Koroma as the three, their record is a lot better than when sort of any of the three of them is missed out. And obviously the two games where they've missed Josh Koroma, the Bournemouth and the Coventry games, that they've not scored and really haven't created too many chances either. Although obviously, Isaac Mbenza should have probably squared it for Ginny Bakuna or scored himself against Coventry. That they haven't really created chances, and I think that's sort of a big challenge for today's game, and something we'll be looking out for is Carlos will be continuing to try and find a solution to that problem and how to get the team playing without that first choice front three available to him.
Because what defensively, I mean, obviously one man I haven't mentioned as well is Ben Foster, incredible goalkeeper. He continues to defy. He's getting on a little bit. I mean, says me, big fat bald man, but he's he's retired from international football. I would say I would stick my neck out and say he's comfortably the best goalkeeper in the Championship. Potentially still a top goalie in the Premier League as well. I think he really is superb for Watford, and he does form. He's one of the most, you mentioned earlier about how you can hear all the players talking when there's no supporters in the ground and shouting. And obviously Ben Foster's got his YouTube channel as well. So those of you who have seen that will know that he is very vocal during games. Such an important player for Watford. He really is. And he marshals that defence in front of him incredibly well. And Craig Cathcart is out injured. He's one of those that is on the injured list. Hugely experienced centre-back. But the centre-back pairing of Christian Kabasele and William Troost-Ekong has looked pretty solid, really. Kabasele can be prone to the occasional lapse of concentration, but a really, really decent footballer. And on the right-hand side, Jeremy Ngakia has looked like a really, really good pickup from West Ham United. They couldn't come to terms, and Watford picked him up for next to nothing. He's a real robust defender. He loves getting forward as well. And Kiko Femenia on the left if Adam Messina isn't fit. So there is, you could argue that's a Premier League back four that Watford. If Watford fielded that in the Premier League, you wouldn't get many Watford supporters moaning and complaining about it. It's decent. So it does take some unpicking, and there are some hard workers in front of that defence. Tom Cleverley, another man with international and Premier League experience, works so hard in those areas. It's difficult to get through him. James Garner at the other end of the age spectrum, other end of the experience spectrum as well, on loan from Manchester United. He snaps into the tackle. He's around. He does a lot of hard work. So Watford can be difficult to break down, and Watford don't often let teams settle into having too much possession. So yeah, it'll be fascinating to see how they do break Watford down.
Do you think with the likes of Sarr, it's a case of them having to adapt to Championship football? The intensity is obviously very different. The physicality is very different. It'll just take a little bit of time with those kind of guys because they won't be used to the rigours of this competition.
Potentially, I think so. The other one to mention when you talk about young stars at Watford really is João Pedro, and like I said, it remains to be seen whether he's going to be in contention for the game. But these guys are young in a country a long way from home, not necessarily knowing the language. But I've been impressed with both of them in terms of their commitment when it comes to the pitch. And I think it's easy to say, we love the Championship for a whole host of reasons, and it is rugged. There's some interesting challenges along the way, isn't there? But both of these guys have shown pretty good strength and have dusted themselves off from the treatment that really they know they're going to get. They're quick, they're skillful, they're nimble, they're attackers. They know what's going to happen. And, these guys grew up in places playing football growing up. And I don't think it's any different in Senegal, in Brazil, in France, or in Huddersfield. If you're a young flying winger, you're going to get kicked up in the air by a defender, aren't you? So they have to come to terms with it. And so far, to give them credit, they have. I think that the difficulty with Ismaila Sarr in particular is that Watford haven't got him into games as well. They haven't got him running onto balls. I struggle to find a defender in the division who will keep pace with him in a foot race. So what I'd like to see as a supporter is get the ball over the top and for him to run onto. We haven't really been able to do that. So when he's had most of the possession, he's been getting the ball at his feet, and straight away he's surrounded by by two defenders who are happy to pile in and tackle as he'd expect. So I think it's a question for the head coach and a question for his teammates as how best to get him into the game. He's found it hard. There's no two ways about it. He hasn't had the impact, certainly in recent games. Earlier on in games, he got a couple of goals and chipped in with some assists. But in recent games, he hasn't really been able to impact the games as much as we'd like. So I think that's down to his teammates and not so much down to him. He's an incredible player. They need to work out how to utilise him more, basically.
You mentioned players being kind of kicked up in the air. There's no one who probably would enjoy that more than Jonathan Hogg, obviously someone you know very well.
God, I mean, when you mentioned him earlier, you can't help but smile, and the goosebumps come back straight away, because obviously you talk about that goal he played an integral part of, the Watford playoff goal against Leicester, where Troy Deeney scored that memorable goal. So yeah,
Jonathan, don't mention that to Adam.
I'm not talking about that.
Okay. It was a great moment for football. I'm sure we can all agree on that. And Leicester went on to have some fun after that, didn't they? So, but yeah, I mean, Jonathan Hogg, for not just that, fond memories of Hoggy at Vicarage Road, all action, 100%. You knew exactly what you're going to get from him every time he set foot on the pitch. He never ever let Watford down. And a lot of people were surprised, sad, and disappointed to see him go, but by the same token, thrilled to see him go on and have such a good career. But yeah, brilliant player, and Watford will know what to expect. There will be no quarter asked or given when it comes to Jonathan Hogg, and quite right too.
He's been such a key player for Town this year. I think they really missed him against Bournemouth, and that's not to sort of overlabour the point and suggest that Town have kept all clean sheets when he's played, and they only conceded 5 because he wasn't there, because he has played in games where they've conceded goals. But you can see the influence that he has, and not just what he does, but the effect he has on players around him as well, can be absolutely massive. And he's adapted so well to this style, and he's one of the leading players in the division for passing accuracy and number of passes he plays, and even some of his long balls out to the wings, which probably before you would have said was not one of his strengths, has been really fantastic in recent games. So yeah, I think the longer they can keep him fit and in the side, the better, really.
It just seems to be that extra bit of structure there, Steve, doesn't there, when Hoggy's sat there? He's marshalling the defence around it. The two midfielders in front know exactly where they need to be. If they're not marking their man, then they know behind them that they're going to have all sorts of words thrown at them until they're marking their man or back where they need to be.
Yeah, and like, obviously, like, Hoggy gets rightly the reputation for like being quite a vocal player and for not being shy of a tackle or anything like that. But I think just the way that he helps set the tempo and start building the play from the back is probably sort of his biggest strength, really, at the moment. The way that he's been playing, and he's been absolutely Town's best player in some of the games recently, over the last sort of couple of months or so. From that perspective, from what he does on the ball and the way that he enables players ahead of him, I think he's still not going to be running into the final third. He had a run against Coventry, and it's like, oh, anyone but Hoggy for that run, which he'd probably say himself, to be honest. But the way that his vision and the way that he brings players into the game around him and gets people sort of coming on from either side as well, I think you can't overstate his importance in helping Naby Sarr to get forward and helping Toffolo and Pippa either side as well. So yeah, it's a big game for him. We know that he always likes playing against former clubs, so I'm sure we'll be looking forward to it.
Yeah, 100%. And in talking of that, Steve, obviously, like you said, 3 clean sheets in the last 4 games. Hoggy's been a really vital part to that. Throwing to Watford, they've got the second best defence in the Championship, so we're expecting a goal thriller, aren't we?
Yeah, exactly. No, I feel like it is going to be a tight game today. I almost feel like we're almost destined for another 0-0, but as you say, famous last words, Mike, isn't it?
I think there's two teams who've got a lot to gain actually in this game. Obviously, Huddersfield in good nick. They want to banish the Bournemouth result as quickly as possible, carry on that home form. And we all know what the Championship's like. If you win 2 or 3 games in this period over Christmas, it completely transforms the rest of the season. So lots to go at for Huddersfield, and I think they will have seen Watford in action against Brentford midweek when they were, like I said, I think they were pretty lucky to go in at half time level. Brilliant early second half performance from Watford, so they will also have taken note there. Undone at home to Cardiff as well. We talked about supporters coming back, the first game back, and they put in a pretty lacklustre performance against Cardiff. But Cardiff, that was really a blueprint of how to play against Watford. They frustrated them, they got ahead from a set piece and really didn't give Watford a sniff after that. So I think there is, God, listen to me, I'm supposed to be the Watford supporter, but there is an opportunity, I think, for Huddersfield there as the home side to capitalise on that good form and to go for it. Perhaps subconsciously I'm saying that because I think if they do go for it, then Watford will be forced to match them, and we'll see a more entertaining game, and there's more chance of goals and perhaps Watford coming out on top. But Watford do have to break out of this. I'm not going to call it a malaise because, like I say, we're third in the division, in touch at the top and looking pretty solid defensively. So we don't want to upset the apple cart too much, but they do need to be better. The performances do need to be better. And with the attacking options they do have, we've talked about Pedro, we've talked about Ismail Assar, Ken Semmer, Troy Deeney with all his experience. Stipe Perica is one we haven't mentioned. Good old-fashioned striker, good number 9, 6 foot odd, all arms and elbows. So he might have a chance to play. But Watford do need to get these people more involved in the games. They do need to be more of an attacking threat if they're going to have a sort of a real sustained tilt at the top of the table. So both teams, I think, have got a lot to go at. It's the start of this Christmas period, and it could really set the tone. So I think it's a big game, and I don't think either team would necessarily, whilst we'll probably all shake hands on a 1-1 now between us, if we're being perfectly honest, it's an opportunity for clubs for both clubs to really go for it. And I'm hoping, certainly from a Watford point of view, that this could be the game that they click and we start being more of an attacking threat.
Where do you guys see the key areas, the key battles being in this game? What do Huddersfield Town have to do to win? Equally, what do Watford have to do to win?
Watford have got to start ticking up front. They have to. The transition from midfield to defence the midfield to up front isn't working for whatever reason. Whichever formation we've tried, it hasn't quite come off as yet. Whether it's Troy Deeney on his own, tried that on Tuesday, didn't really work. 2 up top looks to be better, but then you risk having just the 2 men in midfield and perhaps potentially getting overrun there. So there's a bit of a Vladimir Ivic has to solve that conundrum if he's going to win the game. How to get that transition from midfield to attack working? How they get the ball to stick and how they make the most of possession in those areas. That has been Watford's problem all year long. They haven't scored enough goals. Haven't looked like scoring enough goals. Sorry, the XG figure is one that I do not care to look at for, and I'm not willing to until things improve. It does not make for pretty reading. So that they have to create more. That's it. It sounds a bit reductive. It sounds a little bit basic, but they have the talent in the side. They have the right mix. We've talked about solid defence. We've talked about ball winners in midfield. We've talked about flair out wide. I've also talked about strikers up top. We've got the lot. They just need to knit it together, and there's no reason why they shouldn't. Whether part of it's confidence, and I don't know what you guys think about this, about a post Premier League hangover a little bit. Obviously, it's difficult coming down, and when a lot of the players are still there, having played week in, week out, probably trying not to lose in the Premier League when you're down there, first and foremost. Difficult to switch that habit to try and impose yourself on games when you've had a tough time of it the year before. I think that's where Watford have struggled. They haven't got onto the front foot often enough. And did you like my little front defensive there?
It was very nice. I think Town had a similar issue when they came down. I think that sometimes teams, when they come down from the Premier League, you almost have to retrain your brain, because in the Premier League, if you try and play sort of very direct and play those nice straight balls up the middle, it's not going to work because the quality of the midfield just means it gets cut out. But in the Championship, it actually can do wonders, and I think it sometimes takes teams a little while to realise, oh no, we can we can be a bit more simple, and that will actually be quite effective.
Absolutely.
I think for Town, it's a sort of a similar story. I think we've seen that they've got the build up of the play, and they can go through the phases from defence to midfield to attack. But it's then once they get into the final, I mean, we've said this so many times, but once they get into the final third, what do you do with it then? That's the question to answer, especially, as I say, with Josh Koroma absent. They need to find the solution for that.
Yeah, and hopefully we're all feeling a little bit Christmassy at the minute. So a win for Huddersfield Town, from mine and Steve's perspective, will do a lot for us going into Christmas, eh, Steve?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it'd be a nice present for everyone. I think that is that the appropriate cliche.
Absolutely. Mike, Steve, thank you very much for joining us and giving us such a fantastic insight into today's game. Town fans, if you're a season card holder, you can watch for free on iFollow HTAFC. If you're not, you can purchase a match pass for just £10. Thank you very much for watching.